Alright, and taking the sole spot in S tier, we have Kolst. What? I'm not a class? Which one of you wrote this shit? Hey, what is up everyone? Kolst here, and we are here for the next rendition of a tier list video. If you are new here, I haven't seen one of these before. This is basically just a way I talk about the balance of the arena. I rank all the classes against each other and talk a little bit about the meta, although I'm going to be a little bit briefer on that part of it just because I have done one of these. This was the list as I did a month ago, and things have changed a lot. That is why I'm making this list, but all the classes are functionally the same. Nothing's really changed there, so I'm not going to talk too much about that aspect, but I'm going to talk a bit about what has changed that has driven major changes to the order of classes and just the overall balance of the arena. Because back when I made the original video a month ago, balance was not good basically, but now things are a lot closer, and there are classes that have moved way up and nothing that moved like way down, but some classes that moved down as well. So let's talk first about what some of these changes were. There were some smaller changes over the last month. The reason I never made any updates though is that the class balance then didn't really change, but in the last week there have been a couple significant changes. First of all, there have been some power level changes to some of the cards in the arena. I'm not going to talk about each one of these individually. Not all of them are important. These were all changes to standard, which were made for constructed, not really for arena, but they do affect arena. The biggest changes though I'm going to point out specifically, the sludge on wheels change, a very big buff. Just because an attack's down, this card is huge for Warlock. Most of these other changes aren't honestly super impactful. Not all these cards are even in. Flint did get a lot better in the neutral set. Blast Charge is a very significant buff for Warrior. And then the other biggest changes are just to the neutral excavates, because Burrow Buster was already a really good card even if you weren't an excavate class, and now it's even better. It gained an additional health. And as well, a couple of the excavate cards, the Trog, basically the worst one drop previously, and also the Canary gained an additional health, and the Steelhide Mole gained additional attacks. So basically some of the quote-unquote weaker choices, although Canary was really good, but or just the excavate package even in the non-excavate classes got pretty significantly better. And as well, there were, again, this is actually at least the second, maybe even the third, but at least the second micro adjust that happened to arena. Micro adjusts are basically arena specific adjustments. Not too much detail is given here, but they did a general class card boost to Priest, and then basically they buffed all the bad classes and nerfed all the good classes. So Priest, Rogue, Warlock went up, and Hunter, Death Knight, Paladin, Warrior all went down. And I'll try to give some details about which cards I think got touched for these classes when I talk about them specifically, but with that we're going to jump right into the tier list. So with that, let's start with the S tier. The S tier is going to be very quick because the S tier is actually empty. There are no classes in S tier. The balance has gotten a lot better. I leave S tier open for like outliers or clear number ones. There is no clear number one right now. Blizzard seems to have done a really good job with this recent set of balance changes, so there is no S tier. So with that, we'll move on to the A tier. At an A tier, the first class we will put here, very surprising if you looked at my last tier list because it was near the bottom, it is actually going to be Warlock, currently looking as by a small margin the best class in arena currently. So I have actually felt like Warlock was rather underrated for a little while. It was a very hard class to play, very tempo reliant, but it had a lot of good tools, and there's always the chance you get really good sludge high roll, but it was very unlikely. That's still the case, but Warlock has had a few things specifically adjusted up, including their excavate package. But that is a bit more likely. Unfortunately, Smokestack is still showing as like a rare, basically, in offering rate. It's not super common because it's an epic. One of the excavate cards in Warlock is an epic. You're just not that likely to see it. But Warlock just has a lot more things going for it now. Against Sludge on Wheels, that buff was very significant. And Warlock still has that 7/7, that location, just very independently strong cards. And it's been several times now that Warlock has essentially been buffed in Arena, and now Warlock is finally taking a spot near the top. The next class we're going to be talking about in the A tier is a class that actually was number one for a brief period before this adjustment due to the last adjustment they did. That was one of the changes from my last tier list, but for a while the top class was actually Hunter. Hunter was one of the classes that was pretty significantly nerfed here to bring them down kind of to the level of the other classes. I just think a few of their top cards got hit just by a little bit, not by a lot, so not too significantly, but it did hurt Hunter a bit, enough to bring it down out of the #1 spot. It does look like Tremors got hit, it looks like Silver Serpent got hit, and it looks like Time Lost Raptor got hit as well. Essentially hitting the early, mid, and late game. Next up in the A tier, we have another class that had actually moved up, I believe, from the previous adjustment as well, but this class moving up because it was the best class that was not nerfed in this case. I don't think it was buffed particularly in this adjustment, but that is Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter really has not changed. It's Wolf or Die, but just Wolf is extremely and absurdly common. So I'm going to have a lot of runs where you play Wolf and then you win, or you don't play Wolf and then you usually don't win. It's just how it works. It's kind of silly, but you know, it is what it is, and it makes Demon Hunter one of the top classes in the meta, really off of the back of just one card. We will actually have one more class as well joining the A tier as well, and that is another one of the classes that was at the top. I believe it was the top class in the beginning. It had been nerfed a few times, but it is still able to stay in the A tier despite being nerfed in this cycle as well, and that is Death Knight. I think Death Knight still just being a really solid class, just not nearly as overpowered as it was. One change I will note that is the most important thing though is that I've said previously in the past, because it was true back then, that you really want to force Double Unholy. That is definitely not true anymore. Double Unholy is still really good. It's still one of, if not the best option in Death Knight, but you really just don't have to force it anymore. I believe what you really want, you want to have a Frost rune so you have access to Excavate and all that stuff, but it's not completely necessary. Like, you can still go like Double Unholy 1 Blood, for example, but like you would like to have a Frost. You still don't want to go Double Blood, because Double Blood is by far the worst thing you can do. But as well, I've seen a lot of people have success with Double Frost. So Double Frost is actually really good. If you can go like Double Frost 1 Unholy, that is a very good combination. Even Triple Frost, particularly if you can get the Fury, is really good as well. But you really don't need to force anything anymore. Just don't go Double Blood is my advice. And with that, we're going to be moving on to the B tier. And the first class we're going to have in the B tier, one of the classes that was a top for a while, but is not quite there anymore, I believe, is Warrior. It's been kind of a high roll, low roll class. It's been that way basically this entire meta, even when it was relatively higher on the list. Nowadays, it's like they've just, every time they've nerfed Warrior, it feels like they're hitting its consistency, not really what it can do if you high roll. So it's still like, if you high roll a Warrior, you're going to be nearly invincible, but a lot of Warrior decks just end up being very disappointing. So I'll just say keep that in mind if you're going to choose it, but overall Warrior ends up being kind of in the middle on average, just as that, you know, you end up being like very strong or very weak most of the time. And I do believe that the cards they hit in Warrior mainly were some of the big cards in the taunt package, but really Warrior doesn't have that much going for it, other than, you know, going for the Excavate or having a good legendary like Odin that you can really build around, so it doesn't really change how you try to play Warrior. You just have to hope that you high roll. But that is Warrior. Next up in the B tier, we're going to have actually kind of the opposite in the sense that it's a much more consistent class, but a bit harder to high roll unless you hit Rooney, and that is Paladin. Because Paladin is just very consistent in general. It's a bit harder to high roll. I mean, you can high roll, you can have like just really insane like Amidas type stuff. But most Paladins end up just being really solid and competitive. If you play well with them, they can typically do pretty well at least, and sometimes really well. And you generally have a lot of interesting tools. It's just that a lot of Paladins are overall just going to be pretty solid overall again. So that's why they go into the B tier as well. And Paladin did fall a little bit by the nerf. I don't think they get hit very badly. I think Prismatic Beam got hit by a little bit, but it was already insanely common and just didn't get hit by too much. So Paladin really didn't change too much either. And the last class in the B tier we're going to be putting here is Shaman. Shaman wasn't mentioned to be changed in these patch notes here. Does seem like they are still mainly in the middle, right around here, right in the B tier. Not much has changed with them. You know, they have some really good late game potential, but a lot of Shamans end up being tempo. There's a lot of spell discoveries. It's an interesting class somewhat if you like that stuff. But again, often just middle of the pack recently, so it's going to stay exactly in that position. And with that, we're going to move on to the C tier. These are classes that are, you know, below 50% win rate if you look at win rates, if you trust those, and classes that I would generally avoid playing. The first one I have here, this is a class that's kind of in the middle, to be honest. I could have put it either B or C tier, but I don't like it because it's inconsistent. Another one of those high-low roll classes, and that is Druid. You really have to either just completely high roll some of the combos they have, either the dragon stuff or, you know, the treant synergy transforming everything to 5/5s, or get Riastraza, or you just don't really have much going for you. It's possible to get a token high roll, but there's just not really enough of that in the game to make that even remotely consistent. You don't have enough of the buffs to like end the game with that kind of aggressive play. So it just makes Druid very, very inconsistent. Even if you get a Riastraza, you have to draw it, you know, it's just a little weird. So again, if you like that high roll experience, you may value Druid a bit higher, but I'm not a big fan of that playstyle personally, so I put it down here. Next up in the C tier, we have, again, one of the best classes or one of the worst classes that wasn't really buffed, at least not by very much, and that is Mage. I did see that Molten Rune went up a little bit in win rate, but Mage was already kind of one of the worst classes. I think it was like third lowest win rate previously, and did not get buffed by very much, so it did not move up by very much. So Mage, I believe, again, is just a very inconsistent class. Really, they only have 3 ways to win. Either they go for just, you know, they keep chaining that 5-drop elemental and they just end the game very quickly. They get a 0-mana Sunspot Volley via Dragoncaster, or they get a Titan off of Excavate. If they don't do one of those 3 things, if you don't do that as Mage, you're very unlikely to win. With more Molten Runes, it's possible you can play a more consistent type of burn style, but you're still going to be fighting an uphill battle against a lot of these other classes, so I don't plan on playing really any Mage. I wouldn't really recommend it unless, you know, if you, again, it's kind of high roll, low roll in that way. Again, if you enjoy that, then you know, you can do what you want there. But if you want a consistent experience, I don't recommend it. And then the last class we have in the C tier is going to be Rogue. Rogue I had as the second worst class before. I think it did get buffed in this adjustment, but the buffs just really overall didn't seem all that significant. And honestly, I haven't played a lot of Rogue, so I don't have that much to say about it. It's still very hard to win without just discovering win conditions from other classes, and again, that just leads it to be rather inconsistent. If you do get Drilly, you can go for the Excavates a lot more consistently as a result of that. But because one of the 2 class Excavate cards is the legendary, you just usually don't have it, so it just makes it difficult. Overall, if you enjoy Rogue, again, you can play Rogue, but I just wouldn't recommend it if you're looking for the best results. And with that, bringing up the rear once again, we have still, I believe, the clear worst class in Arena. It is Priest. Priest did get double buffed in these adjustments, but Priest was like 36% win rate or something like atrocious before this. I think Priest did get significantly less bad. If you're not aware, by the way, in the tournament, like there was a 12-win bounty. It was a $100 prize to get 12 wins. This was a 4-day tournament. It took like until the end of the 4th day for that to even get redeemed, and there were really good players trying, by the way, for multiple days. Like, it was just impossible. I think Priest definitely got a lot better, but I still wouldn't recommend playing Priest. And speaking of that tournament, by the way, the next video I'm going to plan to put up, which will probably be the next one that comes up after this video, unless I end up posting a run before then, is going to be talking about that tournament. I've seen a lot of questions about that. I should bring that up. I've seen the comments, and I'm planning on addressing it in a whole video where I talk about kind of my strategy in the tournament as well. So I thought that would be an interesting thing to do, but I don't want to make this video any longer, so I'm gonna close it out there. Overall, again, as I mentioned, you know, pretty significant changes compared to, again, like previously. Even though I have still 4 separate tiers, really I could have had, like, honestly, the classes are so close that I could have only had like 3 tiers. I could have had, like, you know, the top 4 classes, the middle 6, and then Priest. Like, that would have been a reasonable way to make this list as well, just to point out that, like, these classes are really close. Even if you pick like C tier, like, you're not, there's only currently showing on HS Replay, I think, like a 5% win rate gap between these classes and the top classes. It really is pretty close right now, which would just make it overall so that if you have a strong preference for classes, especially if you think you play a class better, definitely don't feel obligated right now to just take the best class every time. You playing a class better will probably override anything on this tier list except Priest. You probably still shouldn't take Priest, to be honest. But in any case, with that, again, like, just a shout out to Blizzard for actually doing a really good job balance. Took a few adjustments, which is normal, really, but now the balance is actually in a really good place for me. It'll be very cool until the next rotation breaks it all once again, and then the cycle continues. And of course, the rotation will be an exciting time for reasons. Rotations come out with a mini set normally, so it'll be like a month away most likely. But with that, of course, I'd be interested to know what you guys think, which classes you've had success with, particularly with the adjustment, which I believe will be like, it was like 3 days ago as of when I'm going to be uploading this video. So let me know what your experiences are there. Any other thoughts? But yeah, appreciate everyone for hanging out, of course, as always, especially if you made it here to the end. Hit all the buttons, you know, not number of times, all that stuff. All right, we'll see you guys later. Bye bye.